Today's talk is titled "A Paleontologist Looks at the Jurassic Park Movies." It was given by Dale Gnidovec, curator of the Orton Geological Museum at The Ohio State University. So Dale will speak on the presentation of dinosaurs and other prehistoric animals in the Jurassic Park films. The animals are very lifelike, but how scientifically accurate are they? This talk will discuss what filmmakers got right and what they got wrong. So with that.
All right, thank you. Oh, I don't have to do that. At least you're more awake than my college class. Spent the morning grading. Oh boy. Anyway, well, this is who I am. I'm the curator of the Geology Museum at Ohio State University. I work in this wonderful old building, Orton Hall, which was built in 1893, and it was built as a geology building. These layers of rock that it's built from are in geological order, oldest rocks at the bottom and younger towards the top, just like the rocks in Ohio's bedrock. Even the gargoyles up around our bell tower are geologic. Now, lots of buildings have gargoyles. Gargoyles are just carved stone heads. In most buildings, the gargoyles are mythical beasts. They're made up animals. Ours are based on real prehistoric animals. So we've got dinosaurs up there. We've got an ichthyosaur, a pterosaur. We even have a saber-toothed cat up there. Like most museums, we've got all kinds of neat exhibits. I wonder if the lights could be brought down. It'd show up the slides a little bit better. This is part of our Minerals of Ohio exhibit, showing beautiful crystals of the mineral fluorite from northwestern. Oh, that's good. That's much better. Yep. We also have a whole series of cases that show the different kind of fossils you can find in the various layers of the state. We got this wonderful reproduction skull of a giant fish that swam here in Ohio back in the Devonian period, around 390 million years ago. At that time, Ohio was under a warm tropical ocean, and we were much closer to the equator than we are today. Right now, OSU is 40 degrees north of the equator. In fact, the 40-degree line runs right through the middle of the OSU campus. There's a marker there by the main library you go stand on, and you're exactly 40 degrees north of the equator. It's been measured by satellite. But back when this fish was swimming around Ohio, Ohio was only 20 degrees from the equator, and it was 20 degrees south of it. So Ohio is where Australia is today. We've got this wonderful skeleton of an Ice Age animal that lived here in Ohio about 11,000 years ago. 4 of these have been found in Ohio, and I've got one of them. This is from Holmes County, 1890 near Berlin. And 3 years ago, we got this wonderful skeleton of a dinosaur. It's Cryolophosaurus ellioti, found by OSU professor David Elliott. And he discovered it in Antarctica. It's the most complete dinosaur known from that entire continent. It was one of the first of the large meat-eating dinosaurs. It was about 21 feet long and preceded Tyrannosaurus by 120 million years. Now, who am I to be discussing the Jurassic Park movies? I mean, these things made millions of dollars. The first one, when it opened the first weekend, took in $50 million. And the numbers after that are just mind-boggling, at least to a poor paleontologist like me. So who am I to be going up against this kind of money? Well, I'm a paleontologist. I've been a paleontologist for 40 years. I've loved dinosaurs since I was a little kid. I've followed the research. I've dug dinosaurs all over the American West. 2 of the dinosaurs helped excavate on exhibit at the Cincinnati Museum. So I'm quite familiar with dinosaurs. Now, I'll be talking about the paleontology part of this. I will not be talking so much about the biology part of that, if it's possible to use DNA to resurrect these ancient animals. Personally, I don't think we'll do it with dinosaurs. DNA is a long, thin molecule like a thread. It tends to break very easily. I don't think we'll ever be able to reconstruct a dinosaur from ancient DNA. Now, they might pull it off with mammoths, because mammoths have been extinct for only a couple thousand years. So they might pull it off with mammoths, but I don't think we'll ever do it with dinosaurs. Jurassic Park movies. First one came out in 1993, and it was, for me, it was a religious experience to see this dinosaur raise up in the trees like that. It was just wonderful. Got got a funny story to tell about the opening. I can tell that maybe when we're done. But it was really fantastic. Then the second one came out, and what a disappointment, because now dinosaurs were it was just a monster movie with dinosaurs as the monsters. The first one, they really tried to get a lot of the science correct. It was pretty much downhill after that. Here's 5 of them. I've not seen the last one. When I heard how the Brachiosaurus died, I couldn't bear to go watch it. But so I'll be talking about the first 4 mainly. This is what I want to talk about, the outline. Generally, I want to give you a little bit of information on the time involved, something about the environments these animals lived in, a little bit on amber, a little bit on excavation. And then I want to concentrate on some of the animal characters in the film and maybe give you a little more information about some of those. I'll leave the discussion of the human characters to somebody else. First off, Jurassic Park. Where did the name Jurassic come from? Well, the Earth has been around for a long time, and it's sort of kept a diary. What's happened to it? Each layer of rock is like a page in that diary. But these pages have been ripped, they've been torn, they've been erased, they've been scattered all over. And geologists have had to reassemble this book of Earth history in what's called the geological time scale, with the older periods at the bottom and the younger periods towards the top. And the Jurassic is one of these time periods. It's a very small slice of time, only about 56 million years ago, that began about 200 million years ago. And it was named by this guy, Alexander von Humboldt. If you want an interesting read about this guy. He was all over the planet collecting stuff. He named the Jurassic period in 1795 for rocks in the Jura Mountains. They're on the France-Swiss border. If any of you are familiar with the Large Hadron Collider, that's in the same area that Humboldt named the Jurassic period for the rocks in the Jura Mountains. Trouble is, the Jurassic is part of what's called the Mesozoic era, a larger slice of time, which includes 3 periods, Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. And dinosaurs lived throughout that time period. In fact, if you look at the major players in the movies, more of them came from the Cretaceous period than came from the Jurassic period. So this should have been called Cretaceous Park. But that was something that Crichton decided on. How about some of the environments? Here's 2 of the main, at least one of the main players, Tyrannosaurus rex and Triceratops. And they are best known from a rock unit in the American West called the Hell Creek Formation. I spent years in the Hell Creek, and everything about the Hell Creek says it was a very wet environment. You look at the plant fossils, they indicate a very wet environment. You look at some of the sandstones in there. These sandstones have these cross beds, which indicate flowing currents of water. They've got, you can see ripple marks in the rocks there. Everything about it tells a very wet environment. Yet, so these animals liked a very wet environment overall. And then you've got these, the sauropods, the big brontosaur types. The best place on the planet to find sauropod dinosaurs is the Morrison Formation, which occurs in 11 states out in the American West. Over 24 species of sauropod have been found in the Morrison. And everything about the Morrison, I also spent 10 summers in the Morrison, everything about the Morrison suggests a very dry environment, open savanna like this, not a whole lot of rainfall, very seasonally, there were massive droughts. So, and the island, at least originally constructed by Crichton, was rather small, only about 22 square miles. And it just doesn't seem like there would be enough room on an island to have enough space, enough environments for the ones that like dry environments, and for enough space for the animals that like wet environments. It'd be very hard to find that kind of island. Computer's about to start. Okay, I don't know what. All right. Going backwards. Who knows? Well, Otherwise, I'll do shadow puppets. um, amber. Amber is a magnificent thing. It's often called petrified sap. It's not sap. Sap is water soluble. Amber is petrified resin. It's that sticky stuff that comes out of a pine tree when you cut it. And it can have fantastic preservation. Insects and feathers and pollen and all kinds of neat stuff. Trouble is, the amber that they were excavating in Jurassic Park is from the Dominican Republic. And that is about 25 million years old. Remember, the dinosaurs became extinct 66 million years ago, at least the non-avian dinosaurs. So they missed it by about 40 million years. Now, there is some Mesozoic amber. It's quite rare. The best place is from what used to be called Burma. But that amber wasn't really well known at the time the movie was made. Now, the past few years, it's just exploded. There's hundreds of different new insect species known from this Myanmar or Burmese amber. But I don't know, if I was looking for good DNA to reconstruct an animal, I don't think I would go to a mosquito. Because why did that mosquito eat or punch the dinosaur? It was to get a meal. As soon as that DNA is in the animal's stomach, it's being digested. I don't think that's a place where I would go to find good DNA. No. There we go. Yep. This thing is jumping all over the place. All righty. That wonderful scene in the first movie where they brushed the sand off and there's this beautiful skeleton. When they saw that, every paleontologist in the world went, "Oh, come on. It's not that easy."
They got lucky.
They got lucky. Oh boy, did they get lucky. Digging dinosaurs is hard work. You're essentially chiseling the bones out of solid rock. Use hammers and chisels. Sometimes we use jackhammers and power equipment. It's a lot of hard work getting these dinosaur bones out of the ground. Now, what about sending sound waves down and getting a nice picture on a computer screen? Well, when that movie came out in 1993, we had high hopes that technology would advance to that stage. It's been 30 years, it hasn't happened yet. We would love it. I mean, we've tried ground penetrating radar, we've tried different acoustic things. In the movie, they fired shotguns into the ground. Here, they're just banging on a metal plate with a hammer. And it just hasn't worked. And the reason for that is if you look at these bones are petrified. Petrified just means turned into rock. So these bones are rock. So we've got a rock inside rock. There just isn't enough density difference usually for any of these patterns to work. It may still come. I mean, technology is advancing wonderful. Yeah.
Is it ground penetrating radar they're using in Central America to find more and more of these ancient Mesoamerican cities?
They might be doing that for archaeology.
Stone versus soil.
Yeah, that would work.
I think that's LiDAR.
Might be. Yeah, I don't follow archaeology
I know
much.
they just found another city of over 1 million people.
Yeah.
They didn't know was there.
But it just doesn't work for fossil dinosaur bones. Wish it did. It'd make my job a lot easier, but it just hasn't come to pass. We still have to use hammers and chisels to get these bones out. Let's turn to some of the animals that were depicted in the movies. Dilophosaurus, the so-called spitter. This is a much better picture of what that animal probably looked like when it was alive. First off, there's no evidence for that frill on the neck, none whatsoever. And there's no evidence that this dinosaur or any other dinosaur was poisonous, especially this one. I mean, think about it. This one had a mouthful of sharp teeth, big sharp claws on its hands, and big sharp claws on its feet. Would that animal have needed poison? I don't think so. The velociraptors, the heavies in the movie. A number of things that got wrong on this one. First off, the size. The real velociraptor was only about the size of a big turkey. They made it double size. They named it after another one of the animals in the same group, that one, which is Deinonychus. Same killer claw on the foot. Probably same kind of disposition. The original one had them working in packs, very intelligent animals. How could you know how intelligent a prehistoric animal is? Could it have coordinated things like that? Well, we can scan the brains in these things and get very good pictures of the size of the brain. But size of the brain by itself doesn't tell you much. You must compare the size of the brain to the size of the animal. For example, humans have a brain that weighs 4 or 5 pounds. Elephants have a brain that weighs about 11 pounds. Yet no one's going to say an elephant is more intelligent than a human. You've got to compare the weight of the brain to the weight of the body. So how do we weigh a dinosaur? Well, there's a couple different ways. First off, weight is volume times density. So we can get the volume of a dinosaur if you make a nice, good model. And you can find the volume fairly easily by dipping it in water. So now we've got the volume. How about density? Well, most animals have a density very close to water. So we can use a density of about 1 gram per cubic centimeters. So now we've got the volume and the density of our model. But now we have to increase it by the scale of the model. So say you have a scale model of 1 to 14. So now you've got to increase that by 14 times. The problem is you're dealing with volume. You're not just increasing the length by 14, you're increasing the length, the height, and the width by 14, which means any errors in your model are going to be increased by 2,744. That's a lot of error. So that, and any small changes in how thick the thigh is or how thick the tail is or something are going to make significant errors in your estimate. So another way of getting the weight. It's been found if you look at modern day animals and look at the main weight-bearing bones, the femur, the thigh bone, and the humerus in the front leg, or if the biped, just the femur, and take the cross-sectional area of those two. It gives you a very, very good equation that gives you the weight of these animals. It's been tested on all kinds of modern day animals. Gives you a very good weight. And that's another way we can estimate the weight of a dinosaur. An even better method is to take a laser scan of a skeleton and then apply different sections to each of those, and you can get a much more accurate estimate of the weight. For example, the chest area, which has the lungs in it, is going to weigh less than something like a thigh, which is filled with muscle. So they've done these for different animals and come out with very good estimates for the weight of both modern day animals like the elephant and hopefully prehistoric animals. So now we've got the weight, pretty much a good estimate of the weight of the brain and the weight of the body. But now we need something to compare it to. And in this study, we used a modern day lizard. I said, let's take the weight of its brain and the weight of its body, and we'll set that ratio equal to 1. And we'll call that 1 unit of intelligence. And let's do the same comparison for the dinosaurs and see where they fall. Well, the sauropods, those are the big brontosaur types, 0.2. They were just plain dim. There was not a lot of brain power in a sauropod. How about the coelurosaurs? These are the small two-legged carnivores like Velociraptor and such. They're up there at 5.8, almost 6 times more intelligent than an average lizard. That's getting up into the high bird end. That's getting up to things like crows and parrots, which are very intelligent birds. But they're still just bird brains. Right? So even the most intelligent animals of the dinosaurs weren't all that great. Other thing they got wrong in there are these hands that are curved down like that. There are 2 bones in the forearm of most vertebrates. If you've got the one that goes from your elbow down to your thumb side is the radius. The one that goes from your elbow down to your pinky side is the ulna. And for you to do this, rotate your hands down. Dinosaurs have the same thing, radius and ulna. In order to rotate your hand, the one bone has to cross over the other. all right, like shown here. Dinosaurs couldn't do that. Dinosaurs could not turn their hands down. Dinosaurs could not play the piano. They could not have typed on a computer keyboard. They just couldn't do that. So if you've got hands that, if you see any reconstruction of a dinosaur has the palms facing in, that's okay. You see anyone with the palms facing down, they couldn't do that. That's not right. In fact, paleontologists disparage this pose. We call them bunny paws. Right? You know, dinosaurs could not do bunny paws. They could not turn their hands down like that. Also, the original velociraptors were these naked, scaly creatures, but they're in a family that's noted for having feathers. We know over 30 different kinds of dinosaurs now that have feathers. And we know Velociraptor had feathers. We've never found the actual feather fossils with the Velociraptor. However, once again, this is an ulna. All right, this is the ulna of a bird. All right, notice these bumps here. Those are where the main flight feathers attach. The Velociraptor has those bumps. The Velociraptor was feathered. It couldn't fly. Remember, feathers are used for other things. They're used for insulation. They're also used for display to impress a potential mate. And so Velociraptor was feathered based on these bumps on its ulna, which again is one of the arm bones of the forearm. Yep, we know about 30 different kinds of dinosaurs that had feathers. So was Tyrannosaurus Rex feathered? Well, probably not. We've got some, but the possibility exists. Let's say that. The Tyrannosaurus is just one of about a dozen different Tyrannosaurids, members of the same family. And if we focus in on part of the family tree, there's one here called Utyrannus, which was about 30 feet long. We used to think that only small dinosaurs were feathered. Utyrannus is about 30 feet long, and it was totally feathered. And it's a close relative of Tyrannosaurus. And it was feathered because it lived in northern China, which at that time was quite cold. So the feathers on it were probably for insulation. Tyrannosaurus, on the other hand, lived in a very warm environment. So we don't think it had feathers. We've got a couple very tiny patches of skin impression from Tyrannosaurus, and they all show just scales. They don't show any evidence of feathers. So Tyrannosaurus was probably not feathered, at least as an adult. Maybe the youngsters had feathers. We're not sure on that. We haven't found any really young Tyrannosaurs yet. One thing that always comes up when you're talking Tyrannosaurus is those front arms. All right. In fact, I could do a whole talk just on jokes and cartoons dealing with the front arms of Tyrannosaurus. Oh, yeah. Feel free to groan. I said, stick him up. I am. Yes. Anyway. So why the front arms? Well, first off, they're really not that small. They're small compared to the body, but they're actually the size of a very good sized human arm, but it's built more like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's been calculated that Tyrannosaurus could curl 400 pounds with each arm. So they were certainly not vestigial. Also, it has these great big claws on them. And so that shows they weren't vestigial. There is a group of other big carnivores in South America that were as big as Tyrannosaurus, but they had these little tiny arms that were absolutely vestigial, almost no fingers or anything left. Tyrannosaurus, the front arms were not vestigial. They were definitely used for something, but what they were used, we have no idea. How about if you didn't move, it wouldn't see you? Total bogus Hollywood. There's nothing in Tyrannosaurus remote lineage that works like that. And also, this animal had eyeballs the size of baseballs. The bigger the eyeball, the more light can get in, the better you can see. It's even been suggested that Tyrannosaurus may have been a night hunter. And even if it couldn't see you, it could certainly smell you. Different parts of the brain are specialized for certain functions. The part in green here is a sense of smell. It's very, very small in humans. It's like 10 times the size in a dog. In a Tyrannosaurus, it was enormous. Half the brain was devoted to the sense of smell. It probably had the best sense of smell to ever appear on our planet's history. So if it couldn't see you, it could certainly smell you, especially if it was, right in front of your face like that. How about chasing down a Jeep? That was one of the best scenes in that first movie. Go faster, go faster, go faster. Well, you can do biomechanical studies and look at how much muscle you need and the strength of the bones and all that. And this has been done. They've actually had to use supercomputers for some of this work. And trouble is, Tyrannosaurus weighed about 7 tons. All right. If at a run, when coming down on 7 tons on that bone, you'd shatter that bone. You just can't run, take 7 tons and force it down on that bone without breaking it. Also, to get it moving that fast, the heavier it is, the more power it takes to get it moving. So you need huge leg muscles. To get it fast enough to chase a Jeep, it would have needed leg muscles 2/3 of its body weight. So about 4.6 tons of leg muscle. 4.6 tons of leg muscle on an animal that weighs 7 tons doesn't leave much for the rest of it. It's just not a workable organism. So it's thought that the maximum speed of Tyrannosaurus was about 15 miles an hour. Now that's faster than I can run, but I'm not going to be chasing down a Jeep either. So, at least I hope I'm not. So it wasn't going to be chasing down a Jeep. How about ripping through a car? Well, they can calculate based on biomechanics the bite force of Tyrannosaurs. And let's compare it to some things we're more familiar with. Human bite force, measly 250 pounds. You've got wolves and sharks, lions, hyenas, American alligator, saltwater crocodile. All right. How about an adult T-Rex? Almost 8,000 pounds. And they've calculated, they've actually built a model. And the model tooth, and they force it down into like a cow bone and see how far you can penetrate it. And they've actually measured the bite force of Tyrannosaurus, about almost 8,000 pounds. So yeah, I think it could have crushed through a car without a whole lot of problem. Trouble is, in that third movie, it's fighting the Spinosaurus. If Tyrannosaurus got a bite on the Spinosaurus like that, it would have been all over for that Spinosaurus. No questions about it. Plus, Spinosaurus cannot have bitten it back. Spinosaurus has this long, skinny snout, almost like a crocodile. If that tried to bite a Tyrannosaurus, it would snap its jaws. So a fight between Tyrannosaurus and Spinosaurus would be no contest. The Tyrannosaurus would win easily. One thing that always comes up when you're talking about carnivorous dinosaurs is, were they active hunters or were they scavengers? And paleontologists looked at these for a long time. They saw these long legs, these narrow wheelbases. They looked like very active hunters and killers. But like most animals today, they probably wouldn't pass up the chance for a free meal. If they found a dinosaur that had died recently, or maybe one that hadn't died quite so recently. And recently, we've gotten some good evidence. Here's the left humerus. The humerus is the upper arm bone of the forearm. And it's just got all these bite and chew marks all over that match the teeth of Tyrannosaurus. But that's the only bone on that whole skeleton that was like that. It looks like it had gotten buried with just that one bone still sticking out of the sediment. And a Tyrannosaurus came along and said, oh, here's something I can chew on, and chewed on this bone. But it couldn't get to the rest of it because it was buried. So that represents scavenging evidence. There are also some other bones that have these teeth marks of Tyrannosaurs. And those are the toe bones of other Tyrannosaurs. And we don't think a living Tyrannosaur would put up with something nibbling on its toes. So once again, we think this is good evidence of scavenging. We also have good evidence of active predation. there's more than one Triceratops horn that looks like it got bit, and yet it healed over. So there it was going after a live animal. And so it was a predator. Also, there's a number of these hadrosaur skeletons. The hadrosaurs were the duck-billed dinosaurs, probably the main item on the menu for Tyrannosaurus. And here's one that's got these tailbones that all became fused together. And the reason it got infected, because you can't see it here, but here's a part of a tooth. And those dentitions on the tooth are diagnostic for Tyrannosaurus. Yet the animal lived enough to, for it to become infected and get those bones fused. So there it was, again, going after a living animal. It was an active predator. So it did both. The original area was 22 square miles. I asked the OSU Extension people how many cows you could graze on an area that, and they said about 100 cows you can graze it. How many would you need to fund or fuel a T-Rex? You would need about 30 a year to power a T-Rex. So if you need 30 for one T-Rex, you're going to need a third of that island just to supply the T-Rex. What about all the herbivorous dinosaurs on that island? There'd be nothing for them to eat. Well, you could feed them lawyers like they did in the movie, right? Well, after the first movie came out, a couple of paleontologists actually calculated how many lawyers it would take to fuel a T-Rex. And they calculated it would take about 73 lawyers a year to feed a T-Rex. However, note the date on this. This is 1997, just a couple years after the movie came out. We used to think that dinosaurs were cold-blooded. I mean, they're reptiles. Modern-day reptiles are cold-blooded. So we thought the dinosaurs were cold-blooded too. But there's a whole lot of evidence that suggests they were endotherms, warm-blooded animals. I got a whole talk on this. Maybe I can come here and give that talk sometime. So why is that important? Well, it takes about 10 times the food to fuel a warm-blooded endothermic animal than it does to fuel a cold-blooded animal. Which means that if dinosaurs were warm-blooded, if it took 73 lawyers a year to feed a cold-blooded T-Rex, it would take 730 lawyers a year to feed a warm-blooded T-Rex.
Problem solved.
Problem solved. Hope no one's here lawyers, but.
I've never seen the movie.
Oh, shame on you.
I'm not a big dinosaur person.
Well, okay, well, I'm not a big movie person, but I love that one.
But yeah,
Yeah, that's a lawyer. Oh, gee, I don't know. I'm sure that someone counted. Yeah.
Just about everybody that was on the island at the time.
Yeah. My favorite, no, my favorite lawyer joke is, how many lawyers does it take to shingle a roof? Depends how thin you slice them. Anyway. Moving from the carnivore to the herbivore, Brachiosaurus, the wonderful scene where they're up in the tree and the Brachiosaurus comes along and ripping leaves off and chewing like a cow. They did not chew. Those teeth are not chewing teeth. So they're simply for stripping off leaves and swallowing, slipping off leaves and swallowing. The digestion took place in the big bodies, which are just big digestion vats. So they didn't chew like cows. And also, it never was explained where the plants came from. I mean, if you're getting dinosaur DNA from mosquitoes, how are you getting plant DNA for all the other things that these animals would have needed to survive? Moving from the dinosaurs to some of the other animals in it. One of my favorite group of prehistoric animals is this group, the pterosaurs, the flying reptiles. We know about 200 species of pterosaur. They're known from all over the planet. They're generally grouped in the two main groups. One group called rhamphorhynchoids, they've got long tails, and these were sort of small, crow size, eagle size, maybe down to sparrow size. And they were a lot of fish eaters and bug eaters amongst them. The other group were the pterodactyloid pterosaurs with these short tails. And some of these got big. For years, the biggest one we knew of was Pteranodon. It was about 25 feet from one tip of its wing to the other. And for decades, scientists thought this was the biggest animal that could possibly fly. And then in Texas, we discovered the bones of a much bigger one, Quetzalcoatlus, which may have had a wingspan of up to 40 feet. This was a big animal. It could look a giraffe in the eye. And it was probably an intercontinental soarer. But it actually fed on the ground, more like a heron or a stork. These animals had very weak back legs, very weak back claws. There's no way they could have swooped down over a crowd of people and picked one up and carried it off. They just didn't have the equipment for that, much as I like this particular comic. And finally, to finish up here, another neat animal that was in the thing that wasn't a dinosaur is this animal, the thing that jumped out of the pool. And that's called a mosasaur. Now, you've seen that suffix a lot: dinosaur, ichthyosaur, pterosaur, mosasaur. It sort of means lizard. Those other animals were not lizards. Mosasaurs were true lizards. In fact, they're close relatives of the biggest lizard that lives today, the Komodo dragon. Mosasaurs are essentially Komodo dragons that went to sea. And some of them are very large. Here's a beautiful skull at the Sternberg Museum in Hayes, Kansas. That's a 1-foot ruler. They had a neat double jointed lower jaw. They let them do something like this with their lower jaw to bring things back into the throat. And some of them are huge. A couple of years ago, I revisited the Sternberg Museum. That's where I got my master's degree, out there. So I love mosasaurs. And in the lab there, they were working on one that they'd recently collected. The lower jaw was 5 feet, 8 inches long. I measured it myself. Just an amazing, amazing animal. And mosasaurs are one of the few kinds of prehistoric animals we know exactly what they were eating. You know, some of them were eating ammonites, these beautiful coiled shellfish that were very abundant at that time. We know that because there's been over 100 ammonite shells found with a series of puncture marks that exactly match the teeth of a mosasaur. And sometimes we find the skeletons of mosasaurs with bones of their last meals inside. This one had fish bones in it, and aquatic bird bones, and even the bones of other mosasaurs. So if you're ever asked what a mosasaur ate, the answer is anything it wanted. Right? And as big and bad as they were, they weren't the top of the food chain at that time. The big guys on the block were these short-necked plesiosaurs called pliosaurids, and also the giant sharks that were around at that time. We know they ate mosasaurs. There's this classic specimen of a part of a mosasaur backbone that's all infected. And when they x-rayed it, in the middle of it, they found a broken tooth of a shark. And that's probably what caused the infection. So these sharks ate mosasaurs as well. How big were the sharks? Sharks, they were 35 feet, 40 feet long. Weren't as big as Megalodon, but Megalodon came a lot later. That came about 10 million years ago and died out about 4.5 million years ago. So yeah. But maybe the one in the movie was just getting its revenge on one of these. So that's a quick look at the Jurassic Park movies. And I hope you found it delicious, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Yes, sir.
Well, again, I have not seen any of them. So, what did you find was just so bad about this subsequent movie?
They were just monster movies using dinosaurs as the monsters. There wasn't much effort to get any of the science right. I mean, these could have been really educational movies, as well as been exciting, films. But they just went for the wow factor and told the science to, go sit in the corner. Yes.
Gave a couple of examples of certain creatures eating their own kind. And I thought of before, but how common a phenomenon is this? Like in modern nature, do a lot of animals eat their own kind?
That's not a really way to progress much. But the trouble is, well, a lot of animals, like modern day monitors and a lot of big lizard and stuff, what happened is once the babies hatch, they go into another environment. They go up in the trees or go in the forest. And so they avoid being eaten. But if they're available, yeah, the animals will eat their young. Sometimes the animals they make themselves unavoidable or unavailable. So, yeah. Yes.
The scales on dinosaurs, are they like the scales on a snake where it's kind of one way?
They're not overlapping like the shingles on a roof.
Okay.
It's more like a bunch of tubercles and bumps and lumps and stuff. Yeah. Good question. Yes.
Actually, this is something. Have you ever heard the term cantilever applied to a jaw?
Run that by me again.
You heard the term cantilever applied to a jaw, the dinosaur jaw?
No, can't.
Okay. It's from a really old movie, and the scientist gets inside, and he's like, the jaw's cantilever. So, like, my entire life, I've wondered if that's real.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't heard that term.
It's a movie, so I'll choose to believe it.
Yeah, I'll believe it. Yeah. Yes, sir.
The large, my favorite dinosaur, the last time we were saying, what's your favorite dinosaur? It's always been the brontosaur, the large.
The sauropods. Mhm.
So did they eat that same way? They just pulled it and then they didn't chew it or anything?
Yeah, none of them had teeth for chewing.
So they just ate at the top of the tail where the best stuff was, like giraffes nowadays?
Well, there are so many, there's over 100 different species of those. And so they probably divided up the plants. There's some we think like the Diplodocus with a real long neck. We think it mainly, just went out for ferns and stuff on the ground in that area. And then things like Brachiosaur, which were built to reach high, they probably went for the higher things.
And Triceratops, they also were more.
They were lower feeders, yeah. But they have teeth that were made for chewing. So they went for tougher stuff, maybe like cycads and stuff like that. Mhm. Yes.
There's not much chewing needed if your throat is like a foot in diameter.
Yeah. Yeah.
How long have you been with the OSU?
I've been in OSU for 33 years. Mhm. Yep, practically a fossil myself. Actually, no, I never went to Ohio State. I got my undergraduate over at Muskingum College, nice small liberal arts school about 50 miles east of here. Then went out to Kansas for a master's out there in the chalk beds with mosasaurs. Wonderful place. Then started some PhD work at University of Texas at Austin. Didn't really like it there, so I moved to University of Pennsylvania at Philadelphia and came about that close to the PhD, and then wife and daughter came along and my priorities changed and I never quite finished. So, yeah, I wouldn't change a thing because when I got hired at OSU, my boss told me later that they had 61 applicants and anyone with a PhD they put aside because they thought that person would just look at that as a stepping stone. They wanted someone that was going to stay there. Well, they picked the right guy.
I think if you talk to anybody that ever went to Ohio State, one of their fondest memories is the chimes in Orton Hall walking across the
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of my favorite memories.
Oh, it's a neat place. Like I said, it's a wonderful building unless you're a plumber or electrician. 2 years ago, somehow they got the plumbing changed and we were getting super hot water in the toilets. I mean, you would sit down and get a sauna bath on your butt. How'd that happen? I don't know, but that's just something that happens in an old building like that. It was built in 1893.
How do you know? You talk about, and I've heard you talk about that before, the sense of smell and the Tyrannosaurus. How can you look at that Tyrannosaurus and know that it had that large of a section force? How do you as professionals?
I wish I would have brought this one. We've got this wonderful fossil skull that if you can pour liquid latex in there and slosh it around, and then you can pull that out and give you a replica of that brain. And an anatomist can look at that brain and tell that this part's for this part's for that, and that part's for that. Because vertebrates are very conservative in their brain parts. So, and now we don't have to even pour that. They can do that with like CAT scanning now. And it can actually you hit a thing and it'll tell you how big that brain is. Yeah. Yeah,
You're talking about how, Ohio, I think, used to be where Australia was when the Diniphus
mhm,
was around. Now I know that, continents kind of go under each other and so on. So how much of the Ohio landmass that was there is now here versus, how much of it got, I don't remember the word.
yeah. Continental crust doesn't get destroyed down. It's too light. It's like trying to push down the foam on a beer. You can't do it.
Okay.
So that doesn't get destroyed. It might get eroded, but it doesn't get subducted or otherwise destroyed. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what we have now is pretty much what was then there for at least the whole eastern part of North America. A lot of the western part of our country was added later. But this part, has always been part of this, at least since the Precambrian. Problem is, too many books and even museum displays start off with Pangea. All the continents started off as Pangea altogether. Well, no, before Pangea, the continents were separate. Before that, they were together in a previous supercontinent called Rodinia. Before that, they were separate. Before that, they were together in a previous supercontinent called Columbia. Before that, they were separate. So we know about 5 of these ancient supercontinents. And Pangea, the most recent one, is the one we've got the best evidence for. But it wasn't the first. Pangea started to come together about the Ordovician, about the time the rocks down in our Cincinnati area were being formed. That's when the continents started to come together to form Pangea. And then Pangea stayed together until just about the time the dinosaurs started. And then that's when it started to break apart in the continents we've got today.
But the crust on top is still pretty much basically the same.
Yeah.
I'm always curious about the history of the and development of the scholarly work in an area. When did scholars, true scientists, start to really get interested in these animals and get away from, hey, the world's only 6,000 or 4,004 years old at 9 a.m. on a Thursday or something?
Yeah, around early 1800s. First dinosaurs were discovered around 1824. And so that's when things started. In this country, vertebrate paleontology got started, I think it was like 1799 when Jefferson published on that groundswell. So he thought it was a giant lion.
And one of the best universities nowadays doing the most innovative research in this area.
In this area, Montana is very good. There's a lady at one of the, I think she's at Carolina now doing fantastic work. University of Chicago is really good on this. Columbia, associated with the American Museum, is really good for this. Yeah, there's some that are really good.
The more Western university.
Yeah. A lot of this depends on who comes and goes. You get a professor there that's really good in this, and then he goes to another place. So
Who named Quetzalcoatlus?
Quetzalcoatlus, that was named by Juan Langston and the grad student that discovered it, Larson. And it's named after the Aztec feathered serpent god. Mhm.
They thought Cortez was. Ooh, that was
Yeah.
a big mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually helped excavate that when I was a grad student in Texas. Yeah.
In the big extinction event at the end of the Age period, do we have a sense of like how long this took? That is, it can be attributed to this asteroid, but
Yeah.
are we talking about
There's some really
in 100 years?
really good research coming out on that just recently. And the best estimate now is it caused a winter, blocked out the sun essentially for about 3 years. And it was probably during this blackout that, 99% of the extinctions took place.
Especially since dinosaurs were warm-blooded.
Yeah, they would need a lot of food and the food just wasn't there.
I guess, yeah, once you start to take out some of the underpinnings of the food chain, it can climb very fast, couldn't it?
Yeah. Of course, anything within 1,000 miles of the actual impact was done pretty immediately. Either the flash or the
What was the estimate of the size of the asteroid?
about 6 miles across.
Okay. I know it's right there by the Yucatan.
Yeah. Yeah, it created a crater 100 miles wide. Yeah.
is it surprising at all that none of them survived? I mean, none of the large ones, I mean, obviously, some of the smaller ones did, but, okay, so yeah, so 3 years of nuclear winter, yeah, it's gonna kill most of them, but, like you showed, T-Rex did scavenging. There's gonna be a lot of bodies around the scavenge.
For a few months.
And they get buried through natural weather erosion.
Yeah, I mean, the bacteria wasn't, wiped out, and that's what causes the decay, and that's gonna, you leave a hunk of meat out, it's not gonna last 3 years. Yeah, nothing bigger than about the size of a human survived on land or sea at that time. About 50 kilos.
If that asteroid had not hit,
Mhm.
has there been any research on whether those dinosaurs may have survived?
I wouldn't call it research. There's been postulation that, yeah, they'd already been around for 150 million years.
They're very
Why not go for another 66? Yeah. Yes.
It seems to me that dinosaurs, even though we've only been studying them as scientifically for a short period of time, they've influenced man long before that. The myths of dragons and the cyclops.
I don't know if those things, human imagination is just so enormous. I don't think it needs those to power it. Just think of the first Star Wars movie, the one cantina scene, all the different neat things that were in that. And that was just one movie from a whole series that was filled with creatures. And that's just one series. Then you add the Star Trek series, and then you add the Harry Potter series and the Lord of the Rings series. And everything. I don't think we need bones to fire our imagination. So, yeah.
Actually, I'm glad you brought that up because we caught a documentary on a PBS, I wish I could remember the name of it, where ancient Near East following up giant, this would have been mastodon or mammoth fossils, and looking at the femur and saying, well, this must belong to a giant.
Mhm.
And the most interesting thing was the cyclops, because they found the skull, and they mistook the nasal opening for a single eye.
Yeah.
It-
Mhm.
And I never, I've always read mythology and it never.
Yeah, the big opening for the trunk, they mistake for the eye.
There must have been this huge
Yeah.
creature with one single
And
eye.
you can see that, a femur, almost any mammal, a femur is a femur is a femur is a femur. It's just, whether it's that side, or that side, obviously a femur. And they knew what humans looked like because they were always cutting each other up. So, yeah.
Talking about a follow-up to that, like the trunks of an elephant are fleshy, they don't have any bones on them, so they wouldn't be preserved.
Right.
So if you just found like a mastodon fossil and you didn't know about modern elements, would you know that there was a trunk at all?
No, I don't
And
think so.
I'm just wondering how many just fleshy organs that the dinosaurs might have had that just haven't been preserved.
Yeah, they may well have had a lot of different things. Certainly they probably would have all kinds of these combs and stuff that the birds have
Yeah.
today, that waddles and things that we don't see.
I know they always growl and snort and everything in the movies. Do we have any idea what noises they make?
Other than frequency, we know the bigger ones had probably a much lower frequency and the higher ones had higher. But other than that, no. Even the classic, the one duckbill where they have that big thing on the back that they tried to reconstruct to be like a big trombone, doesn't have a whole lot of believability to it. Think how different you sound when you've got a bad cold. And your skeleton didn't change a bit.
Another question.
Great question.
Like juvenile dinosaurs,
Mhm.
like how much do we know about their growth? and-
For some, we've got very good, we've got them from hatchlings all the way up to adults, but that's rare. There's only a few, maybe a dozen species we've got. Right now, we're up to about 2,000, well, maybe 1,500 dinosaur species now. It's been really hard to keep up. Even averaging about, well, it's about 43 a year now for the past 10 years.
I think there was a paper that came out recently that said that some like species of medium-sized dinosaur they thought was actually a juvenile of a larger dinosaur. I don't know if you saw that paper.
Yeah, there's a few of those that we think we've gotten this evolution in. But so many of the new ones are just so different that we know that they're a different species. Like my favorite one are the ankylosaurs, the one with the big tail clubs on the back. And there's one that was just found in South America. The tail, instead of being a club, it has these sharp things on the side that look like an Aztec battle axe. And I think that one is so cool. So it's obviously different than anything we've found before.
Devil's advocate here for a second. People who are good deniers of science, how do they explain all the knowledge we have about dinosaurs?
No, it's a mystery.
None of them were on the ark.
It's a mystery to me too. Well, I've got a talk on the ark. I should come give that one sometime too,
Oh, that'd be fun.
on the evidence against that. So, yeah.
How much do we know about Antarctica? And as far as I know, it's covered by ice, it's hard to really get great deal before. What do we know about its travel, let's say, geological time, you know, where Antarctica been?
If you go back at least, well, since Pangea time, it's been pretty much where it is today. Before that, I'd have to look at the reconstructions of Rodinia and Colombia to see where it was in the far distant past.
Did you say that there was one skeleton that was found in Antarctica?
Yeah, this one was found in Antarctica, but that's, it was still pretty far south, maybe as far south as today, but the whole Earth was much warmer at that time. But it still would have had to survive the months of darkness too. So, but things were warmer. Yes.
In around '84, I made a documentary about Orton.
Mhm.
And the grad student that I had that helped me write it, actually next week was flying out to oppose it in Antarctica. We could go to it.
Mhm.
The Polar Institute, is there any Orton Hall?
Nope, they've got a special building off on West Campus. Yep.
The Ohio State probably knows as much about Antarctica as anyway.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
This is a little bit, much more recent, but I've heard a lot of stories recently about the fossilized human footprints.
Mhm.
Is that too recent for you?
Yeah, I don't follow human paleontology at all.
The Ohio State's had some great paleontologists or physical anthropologists over the years. Frank Poirier used to be in Ohio State, was
Mhm.
one of the best in the world. I don't even know, if Paul Schuley, when I was there, I mean, that guy was off the charts. I mean, he would go out and they'd find a dead body, he would tell you how old it was, man, blah, blah, blah. So that would be the place to find that out, is over there.
Yeah.
The anthropology department. But, yeah, Ohio State's had some great archaeologists over the years.
Mhm.
In my opinion.
Mhm.
Not with- The Poirier, he was one of the top people in the United States.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, paleontology is neat.
Okay, we're gonna go back here a little bit. When was the first time you went, oh man, I love this stuff?
I never remember a time that wasn't the case. I wanted to be a paleontologist when I was a little kid. Volunteered at the Cleveland Museum. I'm from the Cleveland area. I volunteered at the Cleveland Museum when I was in high school. East side, Wickliffe.
No, okay. My parents used to live just outside Chagrin Falls. Nice
Beautiful,
area.
beautiful town. Yep. Yeah, I never remember a time when I wasn't interested in dinosaurs. Yep, got these 8 volumes of scrapbooks I kept as a kid. And any newspaper clipping ever, I cut out, put it in the book. Still got them, about this much shelf space.
Mhm.
Yeah. 3-ring binders. Yeah. Always loved it.
You've been a lucky man.
Oh, I'm a lucky man. I mean,
All your passion like that.
yeah. I mean, I've dug dinosaurs all over the American West and other animals in the American West. I've dug mastodons here in Ohio.
The US is kind of a treasure trove.
Oh, it is. It's amazing. It's a wonderful place.
I love Montana.
Oh, Montana, I love.
I want to go to Montana more than I did Hawaii.
Yeah. Oh, the neatest thing about Hawaii, my wife and I went there about 12 years ago for our 30th. And I got to see tree ferns, living tree ferns. And I've got these fossils of tree ferns from Ohio. And I'd never seen a living one. And going there, that was my wife said, that was the high point of your trip to Hawaii. Yeah.
My high point was in my tie at the Hawaii.
Yeah. Can't compare with tree ferns.
So how slow do the dinosaur digs go?
There's no one speed. It depends on about 5 different things. First off, how big is the dinosaur? We excavated one of the ostrich mimic type dinosaurs, a small one about the size of an ostrich, in about 3 days. We spent 3 years on one of the big brontosaurs. So how big that dinosaur is one. How hard is the rock? The ostrich mimic was in fairly soft shale. That big sauropod was in hard sandstone. How many people you've got on the dig and how experienced they are. Can you use power equipment? Can you use jackhammers or do you have to do it all by hand? And also the weather can really slow you down. We had one summer in Montana where it was 110 for 2 weeks. And I thought I was going to die. So it all depends.
How hard is it? Because as you mentioned, it's, the bones are now fossilized stone. So it's stone in stone.
Mm-hmm.
How hard is it? Okay, so you see a little piece of it and you're trying to chisel away. How hard is it to make sure you don't, oh crap, I just went through the bone?
That happens. I mean, we use a lot of glue. We use a lot of glue. But we've got this special glue called Paleobond. It's sort of like super glue on steroids.
What is it? How do you know what's it look like when you're
Well,
digging? How do you tell?
It depends. Sometimes the bone will be the same color and then it's real hard, but usually it's a different color and also a different texture. The rock is sort of sandy, it's got grainy and stuff, where the bone is really nice and smooth. So oftentimes it's quite easy to tell one from the other, and sometimes not so easy.
So like you see in the museums, the bones are kind of smooth and shiny.
Yeah, that's how they usually are.
It's from crystals getting, or minerals getting sucked into the bones
Mhm.
and fossilized. So do the bones tend to be a harder rock than the surrounding rock then?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes all we find are the molds, where the bone was there and it rotted out and you're left with a cavity in the shape of the bone. Other times the bone is significantly harder and then it weathers out. And there are places you can go out and you can just pick up a dinosaur bone that weathered totally free of the rock. It just varies so much depending on the local chemistry.
Do you have very many interested amateurs with you, or is it these are all professional?
Usually a lot of our crew are amateurs. There's just so much work to be done. The 13 summers I spent in Montana, that was run by the Cincinnati Museum. They ran that as sort of like an Earthwatch program. People would pay to come out to dig, and we'd show them how to dig, how to identify bones, how to map them in, stuff like that. So it's quite a nice. Of course, they got to stay in beautiful cabins where we were in for 5 weeks, my bedroom was that tall.
UC's got one of the great ancient historians. Carl Blagan was one of the great historians at UC. Found the site of Pylos in UC. So UC's it's kind of another undiscovered gem, other than football.
These are some great questions. I could talk about dinosaurs all day. I've been known to do that. Yeah.
I remember reading a story, gosh, maybe 15 years ago about allegations or discovery that organic matter that was found in like very old fossils, tens of millions of years old. And there was a controversy about whether this was really part of the actual ancient or prehistoric creature, or whether it was something else. Is this something that was like controversial at one time? And
Yeah, it was, because some of the early ones where they reported these 25 million year old DNA and stuff, some of the early ones have been shown to have been contamination now. But as the techniques have improved and our methods have gotten better and better, now we think we are getting these million-year-old and 10, 15, maybe 40 million-year-old chunks of DNA. But it's a a little fragment here, a little fragment there, a little fragment there. So
Not back to the Mesozoic period.
some have claimed it, yeah, but I think those are still in the wait and see phase. Mhm.
And when were the, what was the earliest dinosaurs? We all see the Jurassic.
Earliest dinosaurs started early in the Triassic, about 245 million years ago. And they were small and were rather insignificant parts of their community. At the end of the Triassic was a major extinction event. We talk about the big five extinctions. The one you hear all the time about is the one that killed off the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. But that was number 5. And there was one at the end of the Triassic that killed off a lot of the dinosaurs' competition. And that's when they really blossomed there in the Jurassic and continued throughout the 56 million years of the Jurassic and 80 million years of the Cretaceous. So, yeah. Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts about current sort of controversy about extinctions that are happening now that are human caused? And I'm interested in your thoughts on, some who studied this, being familiar with this sort of area for decades. What are your thoughts on the such development we have right now?
We are causing, I think, a major extinction, but I'm not sure you can compare it to the ones in the past, because a lot of things that are going extinct today are things like insects and small animals, which the fossil record is much poorer on than we've got. I mean, I think if our extinction does show up in the rock record, it'll be the one we caused at the end of the Ice Age, where we lost 54 species of large animal here in North America. I mean, people ask me, why were things so much bigger back then? Well, because we live now, we tend to think of now is normal, and now is not normal. Throughout Earth's history, there were a lot more big things running around. I mean, there were just as many small things back then as there are today. So they weren't, not everything was big back then. But the trouble is, we lost, again, 54 species of large animal at the end of the Ice Age. And so we're not living in a normal time period now. We lost the mammoth, the mastodon, the giant beaver, the giant bear, giant ground sloth. We had 2 species of muskox here in Ohio in the Ice Age.
What's the best part of Ohio for you? What's the most fun part of Ohio?
Oh, most fun part of Ohio. Of the periods here in Ohio, my favorite is the Pennsylvanian period over by Cambridge and that area. There are some neat critters in that time period. And some not so neat critters. I mean, I would love to go back in time to see the dinosaurs. I would pay big money to do that. You couldn't pay me enough to go back to the Pennsylvanian period, because I don't mind snakes. I've dealt with snakes out west all the time. If you leave them alone, they'll pretty much leave you alone. I don't mind rats and mice. I think they're kind of cute, but I don't like bugs. And in the Pennsylvania period, there were some big bugs. There was a dragonfly with a 27-inch wingspan. Yeah. There was a millipede 6 feet long. Yeah. I mean, to me, bugs should be big enough to do that, not big enough to rip your leg off. Jeez.
Why do you think the arthropods were that big?
One of the reasons is the oxygen was a lot more. Right now we're at 21%. At that time, we think we were about 31%. And that allowed the bugs to get big. See, bugs don't have lungs. They don't suck in water, air like we do. They've got these little tiny holes called trachea. And the gases just sort of diffuse in. And the more oxygen, the more can diffuse in. So they were able to get bigger. Yeah, we just had some big bugs in. Yeah, oxygen has gone up and down throughout Earth history. That's a whole field in itself. There were some parts of the dinosaur time where it was higher than now, some parts when it was lower now. But 31, I think, is the highest it's ever been. That was in the Pennsylvania, which must have meant the forest fires there were hellacious. Just hellacious forest fires.
What part of Montana did you do most of the work in?
South Central, near Bridger, south of Billings, about 30 miles north of the Wyoming border.
You close to a place called Man Gulch by any chance?
Doesn't ring a bell.
It's on the Missouri River.
No, we were in the area of Billings. Wonderful little town, had one stoplight. We used to go into town once a week for groceries. And we'd always have to time it so we didn't get stuck in the Bridger rush minute. Oh, it's enormous. It's enormous. That's beautiful. I'm dying to take my wife out there. She's never been out there. Take her some of the places I've spent so much time in.
Are there those in the Dakotas?
Yeah.
So all over the American West, pretty much.
Yeah, pretty much all of the American West. Yeah, I've dug in almost every state out there one time or another. So,
You mentioned the extinction of 54 large species at the end of the Ice Age. A lot of that was people, I suspect.
probably.
But why? I mean, for the time of the dinosaurs, they were freakishly huge.
Yeah.
I mean, was it because of the climate, you know, the temperature, and so is, I mean, you'd already said, like, some of the sauropods, I think it was, it wasn't tropical, it was more savanna-like, it sounded like. So, but yet they were giant. Why so
Well,
big then? And
Trying to figure out sauropods is always a problem. I mean, they're just so off the scale of anything we've got today. When you've got an animal that's 80 tons, 110 feet long, that's just so out of our area of expertise. Yeah, they're a mystery. How did they get enough to eat? How did they keep from cooking in their own juice? Because just the metabolic heat would have been tremendous. Yeah, sauropods are not something we've really don't have a good handle on how they worked.
why do you think there were so many large animals?
Well, part of the problem, or part of the reason, is they had a long time to develop it. I mean, it'd been quite a long time since the previous mass extinction. That was at the end of the Triassic. So there was a long time for them to get, but still they got big relatively quickly. I mean, they were massive sauropods, but in the Jurassic, so that's just about 50 million years. That's true, pretty quick.
We've had 65 million years
Yeah.
since the dinosaurs, and we don't have anything
Yeah, nothing else.
close
to
to
that.
them. So it's just why.
Yeah,
Well, every breed of dog came from the domestication of wolves. How did we end up with Great Danes? I mean, you have huge, massive dogs, but you go out in the wild, wolves are all still the same size.
mhm,
And so it's just a matter of they were given better feed options, so they were able to be more, they weren't as selective in their breeding, so they became more variety.
mhm.
They domesticated some foxes and discovered that if they were given the unlimited food of a domesticated life, you can actually get foxes of different colors.
Mhm.
They actually started to diversify once the need to find the perfect match that was guaranteed to survive was alleviated.
Mhm.
There became a lot of diversity.
Russell, you had a question?
I think about the sauropod question, like an animal that enormous, will a carnivore have tried to, is there evidence like carnivore tried to attack animals with that enormous size? And were they being left?
They were probably pretty immune as adults. They were pretty immune. As juveniles, yeah, they would be fair game. And there was extremely high juvenile mortality among dinosaurs. I mean, they would lay, a dozen eggs, and if they're lucky, one or two may have survived to adulthood. Yeah.
It's interesting you think about humans, that one thing about humans is that we're just extremely clever, and we can kill animals that are enormous compared to ourselves. And, in a way, a Tyrannosaurus can't sort of be clever in that way to try to take on a huge sauropod.
It wouldn't have to. I mean, there would have been yeah, but there would have been a lot of juveniles for these carnivores to go after. And that's probably what they targeted. And we like to think of these wonderful Hollywood scenes where you've got, the adult Tyrannosaurus and the adult Triceratops fighting. That probably happened very rarely. Usually would they go off, pick off the young or the old or the lame. Yeah. Yeah. Well, this has been fun. We should do this again.
Thank you.
Oh.
Thank you.